Okay, let's just jump in. So I guess Manan already gave a brief introduction, just add a couple of more things. So I come from a very deep technical background, started my career as a hardware engineer. In fact, I was one of the architects on the AMD quad-core Optron 20 years ago. And then when Intel built their first many-core chip, that was I was an architect there too. Then somehow over the years, I've transitioned completely into software and then infrastructure IT. And then for the last 7 or 8 years, I guess you can say I've mostly been on the business side. I really don't get to do much tech anymore. So, but still have that tech DNA, I guess. Once an engineer, always an engineer. You can't let go of that. So you'll probably see that all the way through. I keep using tech in my personal projects. But anyways, so this is just a story that I had shared in one of my meetings with Manan, and he just thought it'll be good to share it with a wider audience. So I'll talk through it. So let's first start with how did I get myself into this, because this was not the plan. Uh, Basically, I had purchased a farmhouse for my family during COVID in 2021. Uh, in 2021, for those of you who may recall, Texas had the major Arctic freeze come into Texas that led to a lot of property damage. Unfortunately, this farmhouse became one of them where the pipes burst. And before we could even ever move into that house, the pipes burst and the house practically just got shredded. We had the timeline shifted completely and our plans got disrupted. Eventually, we never really moved there at all, as even as a farmhouse, but rather just rented it out to someone and they started living there. Uh, all good for a couple of years. It was a fire and forget operation until this year. The county decided to build a major highway next to this property. There's a lot of development going on the east side of Austin. So and if, by the way, if anyone of you is not aware, just a fun fact that Samsung is building their largest fab in the world right here on the east side of Austin. So that's actually why this highway is being built, to provide access from Austin to Samsung. So it's being built, not just built, but built at lightning speed compared to most road projects. So, anyways, all of a sudden, what was a calm, peaceful farmland that somebody was renting out to live there peacefully turned into a construction zone, and they just moved out. And when the lease finished, they didn't want to be here anymore. So essentially, I guess I have some pictures here. This is the picture of what the Arctic freeze does. This may not look like a lot of snow to you, but for Texas, this is crazy. And then Williamson County decided to break ground on the Williamson County highway. This literally is a picture next to our land where they're standing. And this is how I got stuck with this property, because I could no longer rent it as a farm and it wasn't ready yet for your typical business, which like I can't put a motel there or anything there yet. It's not, the infrastructure is not there, but the future is very different. 5 years from today, it'll be very ready for something good. So that led me to this just two real options, which a lot of people that I talked to for advice suggested: just sell the property. You don't want to wait 5 years on a vacant property that's not producing anything, but rather you're paying income taxes on it. And the other option is to just try to rent it out to someone commercial and wait for the best suitor. I guess, me being me, I said, well, there's got to be a better way to do this. These two can't be the only choices. So this took me on a journey, which is, well, your typical real estate developer, people who develop lands in real estate, are very focused. They're experts. Like one person may be an expert in building hotels, so they purposefully look for lands they essentially don't do a fishing net, but rather take a spear, and they find all the lands in a particular area which are suited for a hotel. They reach out to those people, they try to buy them. That's the way it works, with the end in mind. But here I had purchased a land for something completely different. Its use has completely gotten disrupted. So I have a tricky piece of property and now I don't know what to do with it, which actually you would think is a very common problem, but apparently not at all, because people either will just do farming with the farmland or they will just sell it to a developer, which is in the category number one. And I didn't want to sell it and I didn't want to do it. So I came up with a plan. I decided to use my tech entrepreneurial skills on this. This is all unfolding, by the way, within like the last 3 or 4 months. So I'm not talking like, basically this problem manifested itself and started staring me in the face right in the end of August, beginning of September of 2024. So I mean, I figured how hard it could be, right? It's just an architecture problem. I have architected systems my entire life. So understand my constraints, find the potential users, figure out which of these users have a market demand, build an MVP. If it works, scale it up, and we will have a use for the land. So started with the first piece, and I guess I will start to mention where tech came into extreme help. So not a civil engineer by any stretch, but I needed some basic knowledge to understand what these constraints were, and found the LLMs like ChatGPT to be incredibly helpful in this learning phase of it. Just so there's the learning part, which is usually not a lot to read. I could get it summarized and read it really quickly, but then there would be questions like, all right, well, what does it mean to call a measure water capacity in LUEs, which are called living unit equivalents? What does it really mean if I want to talk about gallons per day? That's the kind of question you will scratch your head for days on Google because they don't have simple, concrete answers. But when you ask ChatGPT, it can give you a range pretty quickly, and you can validate it, and off you go. So I was able to do this work in a matter of days, basically try to understand, well, okay, what are the, I guess a name I can give to what I have written there on the right was kind of my SWOT, basically the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats to what I was dealing with. Then came the second part about potential users. This is, I think, where I could have never done this without starting with kind of a AI friend, if you will. So it literally started with, all right, if I have a piece of land, what are all the kind of potential things people will do with some acreage? And it included everything from you can build a hospital to you can build a home and everything in between, right? You could have a retail shop, you could build a sports complex where people play pickleball, you can build a storage unit, you can build an RV park, you can build a mobile home community. I frankly didn't even know half those asset classes. It just gave me a list of 50 things that people can do. And then I started feeding my constraints into it one by one, saying what you saw on the previous slide. Well, water is tight, so hospitals are out. Hospitals need a lot of water. Hotels are out. Hotels need a lot of water. So what are the? So it kind of helped me distill it down to just a handful of options, and then there was some financial feasibility and location feasibility because this place is a budding metropolitan area, but is not a city part of the city today. It's farmland today. So some things are just not going to make sense, right? You don't want to build a huge restaurant there. So most of it was literally done over one evening, my chat with ChatGPT on the constraints. This is what I know. This is what I do. This is what I got from my ChatGPT advisor on the constraints. And it may sound like really easy, but in hindsight, it's duh. But what it distilled down to was, well, there's a whole bunch of businesses that need a lot of parking in a small office. Now that I just say that, it'll probably make sense to you. Car rental companies, car dealerships, trucking companies need a small office, but need a lot of place to park a whole bunch of trucks. You need RV parking, boat parking. So you see these businesses all around you typically, and they fit my needs really well. So that actually led to me kind of starting to do my MVP validation. So I guess digital mindset really helps here. So not the way you typically think about real estate, but what I decided to do was I had again GPT create for me Facebook ad copies of the kind of different businesses and assets like trucking companies, uh, yada 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 that we could run, and in some cases even create images using AI for what could it look like, just as a concept picture, like what does truck parking look like, an image of a truck parking, an image of a boat parking. And I started just posting Facebook ads for each of these concurrently with that address and say, well, let's see how many people want to park a boat there. Let's see how many people want to open a trucking business there or move a trucking business there. Got some interest here and there. Most of these led to a bunch of Facebook Messenger chats. And I started to do something really simple, which was take snapshots of all those chats that were happening and then start feeding them into an LLM. And after about 3 weeks and a couple of $1,000s down the drain into the ads, I had a whole bunch of data that then I was able to query and say, well, what are the most common things that we have seen? What are the themes through the system? And one theme absolutely jumped out, which is that there's an auto business need in this area. People want to open car dealerships. People want to open car repair shops. Auto was absolutely the business that people want to do, and they're desperately looking for something. So I created an ad that looked like that. Clearly, that image is fake, but essentially looks like a car dealership, got a container office, got a whole bunch of parking, and it said car lots for online car dealerships, people who need a place but don't necessarily need a huge office. And this ad just blew up. I had about 50 contacts within a single day. And well, that threw me down to another piece, which is, well, I can't be the only one seeing what's happening over here. So this was actually a pretty cool thing that I don't think I would have ever, frankly, even done if I did not have access to AI. But on the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles website, I was able to download a list of all the used car dealers in the state of Texas with their addresses. I would say it's structured data, but was very kludgy in that even the cities were named differently by different people. Some people had a space between Round Rock, others people they had just put, it was close to raw data that had to be curated. But this is where AI really came to the rescue. I was literally able to take that huge 30,000 row spreadsheet, dump it into an OpenAI GPT session, and I started to query along with it to see what actually comes out of it. And some things became really cool, jumped out right away. One was that there was, in fact, a serious shortage of car dealerships in Austin. While the state of Texas average was one dealership per 2,400 people, in Austin, we had one dealership per 3,200 people. So you could almost reverse calculate based on the population of Austin that to meet up and catch up with the rest of the state, we need about 300 car dealerships that are missing in Austin that got to be built. And the second part was that I thought I was like, I can't be the only one in Texas that had this idea, right? Sounds crazy that you could build a shopping mall of used cars. So I just queried against and I said, well, and this is where I think that part about data being ugly really showed up in that, well, I want all the car dealerships, all the addresses in the state of Texas, which have more than 5 licenses issued on that location. And remember that the addresses are messed up. Some people are writing it with spaces, without spaces, but fantastic. One query, one line, comma, one prompt, well-engineered prompt, and the data came out. It ranked addresses in state of Texas with how many dealerships are at each of those addresses. Very clearly, there were two that stood out, which had more than 30 in each location. And then after that, there was a few locations with 2 or 3 addresses, and that was it. Then I looked those addresses up on Google and I saw this. So that's the picture to the right of one of those facilities out of Dallas. And you can actually see precisely it is basically a flea market of used cars. The blue and the red boxes are basically offices. The cars parked next to them are the cars that people are trying to sell. So this, in addition to just giving me some validation, I actually looked up. You can also see that they are completely full. There are no empty spots, which means the demand is pretty much there. But then I was actually able to take it a step further and actually have GPT even analyze the image for me, not with extremely high accuracy, but by giving it certain parameters through the prompt, I could actually count the number of offices, count the number of cars, and it could actually even estimate from me giving it a couple of dimensions here of that entire piece. You could see the dimensions that I put on top. It was able to use that to actually give me even ideas on how much average space is needed per dealership, how big is the office. And so I think it's the speed at which one person with no experience in any of this, you can see how I was able to accelerate through this in a matter of days, find a use case, and actually had something. So then come the next part that I have never built more than a fence in my life, by the way. So this was going to be my very first time doing something beyond just buying a land or a house. So I said, well, all right, what does it take? So there needs to be some financial modeling. Again, I am not an expert in this discipline, although I have experience with spreadsheets, thanks to all the tech entrepreneurial experience I had. Used AI to create quick models and then did some hand tuning on them to get an idea of if this can even be made to work. The architecture is where it became pretty cool. So this is actually one of my favorite examples of where AI just changed my world. I had two different electricians come out to this property, tell me if I have enough electric or not. And one of them said, well, your meter is 150 amps. And the other one said, your meter supports 200 amps. It's like scratching my head, right? How the hell do I do this? Do I have to Google this long strings up? And there's not much to data on these things on the internet. Literally took a picture, fed it to GPT, and I was like, 150 or 200 amps? 200 amps it is. Apparently, I don't know if you all can read it, but CL200 here, that means 200 amps. Not only did I know I have 200 amps, but I also knew which of the two electricians is not going to work out because he is trying to trick me by saying I don't have enough electric power capacity available over here. So help me through the process. I actually used it to design. We still did not have enough power. 200 amp wasn't going to cut it. So had never done solar in my life, but one evening I came up with a reasonable design for what the solar could look like to power these facilities. Analysis of different options, construction, load calculation, probably a week worth of brainstorming with my GPT friends. Creation of a website, by the way, it's techspod.com, txpod.com, if you want to visit it. Very straightforward website. Created some additional ads, used it to compare different options out there for property management, chose one of them. Again, probably none of these choices were perfect. You could probably find 20 things wrong with it, but being able to knock this out in a matter of a week first time is a pretty big acceleration. And then had it write my lease agreement, very specifically addressing all the compliance concerns and my property constraints, like you can't use too much water, things like that, because it knew the context. And we were off to a start, I guess. So construction started with the play. I guess this was one of my most interesting learnings around AI in this process. So our relationship evolved between me and my GPT team. In the beginning, they were just my midnight brainstorming partners. Hey, I need to know if this is 200 amps or 150 amps. That's interesting. That's great. Then I started to realize, well, I can just create a list of tasks at the end of those chats and say, well, I need to call the electrician, I need to call the water company, I need to call the electric company, and start making it create my task list for me. Then I started realizing that I can use it as almost my manager, because we actually come to a point where the design is there, we just need execution. So I started using it as my manager. So effectively, I'll wake up in the morning and I'll say, well, based on what you know, what should I focus on today? And it'll say, well, yesterday you had an issue come up with the water company that you reported. You should call them this morning. And I could clearly see opportunities where it was not being optimal, but the ability to do something that would have otherwise taken me 30 minutes to plan my day in 30 seconds while I'm still in my bed, just typing on my phone, was amazing, actually. And then I realized, well, I can actually have multiple roles and I can have multiple managers, one for each team. So marketing, field, on-site, legal, CEO, and then they can start talking to each other as well sometimes to come up with, discuss their priorities in between them. And I will get a singular task list to say, today you have to make a Facebook post, today you have to go to site, today you have to send this vendor this email. And they had the full context so they could talk to each other and give me what I needed. So my days actually started becoming shorter while and I was just less stressed, more focused on just following orders, if you will. And like I said, I had to come to terms with, I guess this is where my human leadership experience came into play. I have run big teams in the past as a CEO, and I know that the teams are typically not going to give you the absolute perfect that you can see, but sometimes the best answer is to just let them be rather than trying to correct them. And that's what I started doing. I think for me, the rubber really hit the road. So remember, we started in September and this is October. I had to take a 1 week break in the middle. And typically this would give me anxiety to the nth degree, right? Because I have a whole bunch of vendors burning thousands of dollars a day on construction. How do I make sure they're going to do the right thing while I'm gone? Well, thanks to me not being the CEO of this project at that time, I just asked the CEO, I was like, give me a to-do list for this company and give me a to-do list for this company and give me a suggestion on how often should I check in with them and tell me what questions I should be asking them to send me a response to every day so I know what's going on. 1 hour later, we had a vacation plan ready. I printed those out, handed those to vendors in the field because they're not particularly very tech savvy. And I took the break and it worked out seamlessly through the week. Work kept going. Just want to show you guys a glimpse of these are all the different chats I had going on. You can see how I've given them roles in my process. So there was a copywriter that was writing my social media posts for me. They were communicating with each other through me sometimes. And typically it was just a dumb copy paste for me. I could have automated this easily, but I was just being lazy a little there. And all this team basically there was only one person doing the work. Everything else was just planning and prioritizing and distilling it. So I could actually hit the execute button at the end while I was also running another full-fledged venture. So this is a side gig. Stuff started coming together. I think this was my catchphrase in the beginning of October. Stuff is looking real. We got a huge pad. We started getting offices delivered and installed. And then lo and behold, we started getting paying tenants in there through that system. And at this point, we have 6 tenants there. You can see the offices. There are cars being sold out of there. Offices look like this from the inside. I would clearly say our MVP has passed and now it's time to scale up. And I guess the story that I wanted to share was, I think AI could do a much better job of alignment than I could because emotions got in the way. One day I would be excited about doing a social media post because my son talked about something, but AI would tell me it's not the priority today because you got to call the electrician as much as you dread talking to him. And basically it reduced my ambient stress. I felt like prioritization is a big part of leadership, and I felt like that was something that was off my shoulders. It was making mistakes right and left. It was definitely not as accurate as I would like a spreadsheet to be. It would make approximations, it would hallucinate, but just that 10% inaccuracy. I mean, again, this is my human leadership, right? I have managed teams. I know that, like, I guess why would AI is not always correct. The simple answer to that is, are people always correct? And the answer is no. If I had a 100% team, how many errors do you think they made on a given day? A lot of them, right? Just tolerated them. And then I guess life lesson learned was that it was really been fun, but I don't think I have a career in construction. And the second life lesson learned was never buy an investment asset again without a clear plan. Otherwise, you get stuck like I did over here. But the fun part about all of this is I think I have significantly increased the value of this property, turned something that was going to be a liability into an actual cash flowing machine, and has a significant upside to scale if I wanted to scale it, although I haven't decided if I will or not. And I guess now I can wait for a few years for that highway to build and sell that property to probably a big hotel name or a big bank or something for top dollar. So that's the story, I guess, and how AI helped me achieve this singularly without any help from anyone else.
Guys, this was fantastic for me. I heard the 10 minutes version earlier, but I loved the detail. So if you guys have any questions, please go for it.
Sure, absolutely. If there's any questions or comments?
So I'm super curious as how you were using like separate threads for your chat GPT for each kind of like topic you had, or was that different assistants you created for each of them? How did that work for like having context across things and maintaining it over time?
I was using the ChatGPT memory feature to have cross context. I was using different threads. I actually found, Thanos, that there was actually a lot of confusion, like just like us humans, if you overload us with, because I was having very detailed discussions to it. There's a civil engineer and there's a legal lawyer. If I put them all in the single thread, it will just get totally confused. Basically, I would start getting suggestions related to legal in the middle of civil and whatnot. I almost had to build them like a hierarchy that worked very nicely. So it actually started to mimic the way I would have actually built a human team here. So there were civil engineers, but then I need a project manager because there is no way that information is too wide. So my conversation sometimes with the civil engineer would then get summarized and then just get pushed into the project manager and then the CEO basically at the top and then sometimes even back the CEO would sometimes even create messages for send this to the CMO, send this to the CTO, and we'll just copy that back and get their inputs as well. So if I had automated it, I think, and put them all in a single Slack room, that would have been absolutely the right way to do it. I just didn't want to do it, but could definitely build something like this. And what I realized was this actually, so talk about how my lessons learned here went back into my tech venture, which is my day job. I think I learned a lot about how to maximize the value of this. So one of the things we have done is we were actually building a monolithic AI bot for our companies that are in our portfolio in my tech investments. And now we are actually not doing that anymore. It's no longer a monolith. It's actually multiple smaller bots, because it actually gives you a significantly better time to value. So I think time to value was the metric here. The ability to create something specialized is so much easier than trying to create a monolith that can do all kinds of things. So it's basically microservices all over again, just applied in a different context.
Cool.